Welcome to a special presentation to preserve, protect, and defend the soul of America. Over the last century, the United States developed an intricate legal and social machinery to move children between families. Today, we are examining the mechanics of that machinery, from the forced separations of the baby scoop era and the rise of international markets, to the contested ethics of transracial placement and the DNA revolution currently dismantling the sealed record system. The American adoption system: power, family, and the search for origins. There is no single thing called the American adoption system. Instead, we have a constellation of legal frameworks, private agencies, religious institutions, and market forces that determine how children move between families. Across its history, this arrangement has been defined by a constant friction. On one side is a genuine human desire to provide children with loving homes. On the other is the tendency of institutions to define a proper home in ways that reflect the interests of those with power more than the interests of the vulnerable. This visualization highlights a structural paradox. Over here, we see roughly 100,000 children currently in the foster care system, disproportionately older children and children of color, who are legally free for adoption but wait an average of 3 years for placement. Yet the vast majority of private market capital and agency resources is concentrated almost exclusively on a shrinking supply of healthy infants. To see how this market mismatch was built, we have to look back at how adoption practice historically altered legal realities to satisfy the desires of prospective parents. Following World War II, American social work and medicine collaborated to protect the image of the nuclear family. Under the influence of pathologicalizing psychological theories, unwed motherhood was categorized as a neurotic disorder. If a woman became pregnant outside of marriage, institutions argued she was, by definition, unfit to raise her child. Hundreds of maternity homes were established to isolate these women. They were often stripped of their identities, given pseudonyms, and repeatedly told by professional authority figures that surrendering their babies was the only moral and responsible choice. Inside hospitals, the coercion became more direct. Women have testified to being denied the opportunity to hold their newborns. Social workers often secured signatures on irrevocable surrender papers while mothers were still physically recovering from labor or sedated from delivery. To finalize these arrangements, states enacted the sealed record system. Original birth certificates were locked away, and amended documents were issued, listing the adoptive parents as the parents from birth, effectively erasing the child's biological and medical history. Between 1945 and 1973, an estimated 1.5 million American women surrendered infants under these conditions. The system only began to falter when the legalization of abortion and the rise of women's rights gave unmarried pregnant women actual legal alternatives, suddenly reducing the supply of adoptable infants. The baby scoop era set a dangerous institutional precedent. It established that erasing a child's true origins was an acceptable price to pay for providing adoptive families with a sanitized, natural family narrative. This same logic of erasure was weaponized against Native American communities. For a full century, the U.S. government forcibly removed Native children and placed them in boarding schools designed to kill the Indian by eradicating their languages and religions. By the 1950s, this shifted into the Indian Adoption Project. The Bureau of Indian Affairs formalized a plan to transfer Native children exclusively into non-Native homes. In some regions, up to 35% of all Native children were removed from their communities, often because social workers misread traditional extended family structures as neglect. Congress responded in 1978 with the Indian Child Welfare Act, a law recognizing that a tribe has a collective interest in its children's well-being. However, that act has recently faced sustained legal attacks at the Supreme Court, as opponents seek to frame tribal sovereignty as racial discrimination. This mirrors the transracial adoption debates of the 1970s. Black social workers argued that placing Black children in white homes without specific racial socialization left them unprepared to navigate a racist society. They contended that removing children from their communities was a form of extraction, not rescue. In both Indigenous and Black communities, child removal was frequently driven by systemic bias and cultural misunderstanding, resulting in the extraction of children from communities that could have been supported instead. As the domestic supply of infants shrank, the market expanded globally. Following the Korean War, thousands of mixed-race children were exported to the United States, establishing a durable rescue template that fused humanitarian impulse with American exceptionalism. The collapse of the Soviet Union in the 1990s triggered a massive expansion. Images of Romanian orphanages packed with malnourished, stimulation-deprived children shocked Western audiences, generating an enormous demand for international placements. This diagram illustrates the financial architecture of that boom. With fees reaching $50,000 per child, money flowed from Western parents to agencies, foreign facilitators, and orphanage directors. This created powerful institutional incentives to produce adoptable children, even if they were not truly orphans. This demand was amplified by an evangelical Christian adoption movement that characterized the orphan crisis through a statistically flawed claim of 147 million global orphans, a figure that included children living safely with a surviving parent or extended family. The consequence was the rise of paper orphans. Children with living parents were legally laundered through falsified paperwork in countries like Guatemala and Ethiopia to satisfy the market demand of Western families. When the transfer of human beings is governed by private market incentives and unregulated demand, the system predictably devolves into fraud and trafficking. For 50 years, the adoptee rights movement fought a state-by-state battle to unseal birth records, but they were largely met with institutional resistance. Commercial DNA testing kits arrived as an unintended technological crowbar, bypassing those gatekeepers entirely. Millions of people submitted their saliva to databases, allowing adoptees to bypass the court system. By cross-referencing genetic data, they began uncovering their biological relatives and exposing decades of hidden history. The psychological weight has been profound. Adoptees have discovered that their official paperwork was fraudulent, uncovering cases where birth mothers were told their babies had died, or where children were simply stolen and placed for international adoption. Adult adoptees are now using this data to form advocacy coalitions, shifting the political power dynamic away from adoption agencies and demanding a more honest accounting of their origins. By making the very concept of a sealed record obsolete, technology achieved the transparency that decades of legal activism struggled to secure. It validated what advocates had argued for generations, that the desire to know one's origins is a fundamental human need, not a neurotic betrayal of one's adoptive family. The historical evidence suggests that the American adoption system has too often served as a market solution for adults rather than a welfare tool for children. This reality demands a shift in priorities. We must redirect the vast institutional resources used for placing children towards supporting vulnerable mothers and preserving the families that the system currently extracts from. A truly ethical system must answer first to the children caught within it, honoring their right to identity and truth over the desires and ideologies of powerful adults. This comprehensive analysis is derived from the first book. The book is available to purchase in all Amazon bookstores. Please subscribe and press the bell icon to preserve, protect, and defend the soul of America.